welcome to the workshop today. This is our first event actually this year, and we're really looking forward to it. So welcome back to the ECR network. If you haven't been to one of these events before. The aims of the network are for us to have some peer support in the OR community. So get your questions answered, have ECR work featured, and celebrate ECR accomplishments. And we're also trying to provide information for ECRs on appropriate training events and workshops. And this year we're now a special interest group, or SIG. So please join our SIG to receive emails so you'll hear about anything that we're doing there first. And if you use LinkedIn, we also have a LinkedIn group where we kind of more informally post things that we think are relevant to the ECR community. So you could join us on the LinkedIn group as well. In terms of events, we try to do a few events per year. In the past, we've done some about making an impact with your research and impact case studies. And we had an event recently about career pathways in OR. And we have some upcoming events as well. So we're running a 2-day workshop before OR 65 and a joint event with Warren in the autumn. And please let us know what would be useful for you. So I really want to try to encourage you to actually have a look at the workshop that we're running this year and think about coming. So it's going to be in the 2 days prior to OR 65. And it starts on Sunday, the 10th of September. So we're going to have some networking and a plenary talk. And there's going to be a dinner and networking as well. And on Monday, we have a lot of different sessions, including how to get published and where to publish. And then talk about funding opportunities, how to write a good funding proposal, and a mock panel exercise. And you can go and have a look at the program as well as up online. So you'll see from this, we'll have a lot of really senior people in the OR community that are given their time during these couple of days to come and work with us and help develop us as ECR. So I think it's going to be really great. It's also only £60 for the 2 days, and all of the meals are covered. And I think it's actually cheaper to register for the workshop and the conference because you get quite a big discount off the main conference if you register for the ECR event, but you're not actually limited. You can come to just the workshop and not the main conference, but you do get a big discount if you come to the conference as well. So that's enough from me. Just to quickly show everyone who's involved in the committee and in organising these events. It's myself, Sarah, Luke, Siamak and Amelia. And we're all from different universities. We meet really regularly to try and organise these events and to give information to the ECR community. So if you're interested in becoming involved in the committee, please let us know as well. You send me an email or contact Carol, and her email address is there. Okay, I've taken up enough time, so I'm going to stop and welcome Celine and let her take over.
Thank you very much, Laura. And also thank you very much for all the work that you have been doing for the ECR community. Like, this is very, very important, I think, for young people who are coming into the profession. But actually what you're offering is very good for many of us. The program looks very exciting for the during the annual event. So I will be talking today a little bit about my teaching philosophy. And hopefully we're going to have good fun in the next 2 hours. So before I start, I would like you to turn on your cameras if it is okay, because when I'm in the classroom, I really get a lot of positive energy by looking at people's eyes, and you know, it feels like a great if I can also do the same with a wall of you know, little pictures. So we're going to be talking about how to teach effectively and with a lot of fun some of the technical courses that are within the realm of data science, operations research, or applied mathematics in general. But before we go into this, I would like to put our minds into the same space in some sense, so bring us all to the same mindfulness. So I'm going to spend a few minutes like motivating ourselves, why we are here, why am I here, why you are here. Okay, so join me and let's think together a little bit. So I do hope that you are here because you all think teaching is important and it is an important part of our job. But hopefully you also recognize teaching also supports other things that we do. So many people come into their early careers thinking that research, teaching, and admin are three separate tasks, and sometimes even get advice from more senior people to minimize their efforts on teaching or admin. But I actually think it's the other way around. If you approach teaching carefully, mindfully, you can make it efficient. And you can also teach in a way that it can encourage you to become a better researcher. Because along the time, as you teach, you will also yourself learn to think clearly, step by step with your students, if you follow my philosophy at least. And I believe that will actually support your research. And I think many people have this idea that some people are naturally good teachers and some people are naturally bad teachers. I don't know where you are on this, but many people have this concept. I more or less agree. I mean, some of us are more comfortable in connecting people. Some of us are a lot more comfortable in standing in front of 100 people and just picking a topic and talking about it. But it is not the end of the story, right? So wherever you are, whichever is your belief, it is just another task. It's like riding the bike, like learning how to play basketball. I mean, teaching can be acquired and everybody can become naturally better at it, whatever their starting is not relevant to it. And then that means that like any basketball player or anybody else who are trying to improve their skills, we need to have a plan of improvements. Somehow we need to be cautious about where we are in our teaching journey. And also, have little targets in front of us. They don't need to be very ambitious, but step by step, we can have a goal for our teaching that we are trying to achieve. Yeah? And hopefully you would like to walk this journey in a conscious way, and that's why you are here. Now, I would like to also warn you that I'm going to talk a lot about a very ideal scenario, like how teaching should be done. I mean, from my perspective, how you can do a lot of like great improvements and etc. But please do not get alarmed. You're not expected to do all of these things over your career, and you're not supposed to do all of them for one course for sure, right? So I'm just going to give you a little bit of things that made me really excited over my career, and hopefully you can just take a bit of advice and maybe make good use of it in the future. So why am I here? Why am I the person who is talking about this? I do believe that I do have a very rich experience in teaching. So I did my undergrad in industrial engineering in Bilkent University in Turkey. And this is a department that is very traditional in operations research undergraduate teaching. We have longer history and we had great teachers. And more importantly, at a very young age, my undergrad would involve undergrad students and master students in teaching activities. So as a first year master student, I had opportunities to actually directly teach to undergrad students. And then I went to Cornell University for my PhD. And during my PhD, I was given full responsibility to teach full modules during summers and also eventually in my final year. So I taught to third year undergrads in Cornell, say optimization and game theory. I gained a lot of experience there. And then from there, I moved to Singapore to a new university, which was being funded by MIT in collaboration with Singapore government. And this was a startup university, which is like a very unique environment to work in, because literally when I walked into the university in April 2012, there was nothing. So there was a rough idea about what we want to do, but there was not a curriculum and there certainly were no lecture plans. But we had people. So they recruited people like myself with similar philosophy, and then they assigned mentors to us from MIT who were subject experts in linear algebra, in calculus, in physics, in operations research, so you name it. So we formed these little teams, and then we devised both the curriculum and the lecture plans in great detail. And that's what I am going to reflect today, like all these like 8 years that I worked there with all this group of people, what we have taught to be a good way of interacting with students. And our goal was to teach extremely rigorously mathematical subjects, but while trying to give this rigor, try to make the students creative, active thinkers, and make them lifelong learners. So our goal had never been to teach a whole like list of topics from one subject. Often we sacrificed the breadth in order to make sure that we actually capture the key concept and teach it very thoroughly. And we always wanted to partner with students. So most of the activities I will show you actually are designed by the teaching assistants ourselves and the students together as a group. And we believe that this is a very nice way of working. And also a lot of volunteering, the teaching experience in like various places of the world. One of them is Cambodia. So I think that also gave me some diversity in the sense that I can teach to people who barely speak English to PhD students in the well-known universities in the world. So that's why I am here, and I feel like slightly qualified to talk to you about teaching. Yeah. And I like this picture a lot. So this is the end of my first calculus class that I taught in Singapore. And it was a very tough exam. This is taken after the exam. But if you look at the students, you can feel that they're happy. Even they came out from a hard exam, some of them will get D's and some of them will get A's. But the feeling is that they felt that that term was well spent and they deserved the summer break. So that's one of the goals, I think, to have after teaching, say, one term. So as I said, I think mindset is very important. And I would like you to just 1 minute reflect on the following 8 questions, okay? Just read them quickly and answer and just judge where you are. All right. I will not ask you where you are, like what is your point on this. This is for your personal reflection, but I'm just going to share you the next slide, which I do really like very much. It is the 10 commandments of the growth mindset. And if you Google a little bit, you will see that a lot of people are trying to be very mindful about their personal journey, and learning journey is one of them. And I think as educators, it's our job, one of our jobs is actually to change the mindsets of the students in the classroom by using some of these examples. Because when we are teaching mathematics classes, technical classes, confidence in trying to learn the subject is very, very important. And I strongly believe, especially for female students, there is a big barrier in approaching technical subjects. If we can help them a little bit to change their mindset, and even when they are second year, third year undergrad students, tell them that, okay, this may be challenging to you, but you need to take it slowly, and you need to trust yourself, and you need to really think as if you're 7 years old and approach this subject step by step and make it somehow part of the daily conversation. This is very useful. But again, I am not an expert on this. It's just something that I really like thinking. So I wanted to start with this so that we have growth mindsets in our minds when we are teaching, and hopefully aim to change the mindsets of our students as well in the activities that we plan. Now, I'm going to advocate today a modern approach to teaching, but in order to be aware of what is modern, we also need to identify what we think is traditional. Okay. So we're going to do a brainstorming. Can everybody write one single word on the chat about what comes to their mind first when we say traditional teaching methods? One word or one sentence, but don't overthink, just pop it out. So we have great examples. Yeah. So having the students as passive participants who only listen, maybe directly on the board and chalk. Yeah. And knowledge transmission, and I'm hoping Luke and I are thinking the same thing here, where the knowledge is transferred from the teacher to the students, but not the other way around. That's excellent. So I could ask you what is modern education, but I've already done that before, and I know you had a moment to think about it. So this is like what I, when I first did exercise, taught myself, and this was my brainstorming. So traditionally, for a very long time, especially for technical courses, we've been thinking about teaching as teacher-centered, which sometimes the modern educators, education researchers call this sage on stage. So this professor who has written books and articles, maybe developed some of the theorems, that related to our subjects, comes to the board, and then they tell about what is important to them in the order that they have planned. They finish it, they maybe solve some exercises, do their activities, and they leave. And usually the traditional teaching is like very discipline specific. So there are certain number of books that had been used, like classical examples that have been given, typical questions that are being asked over the years for the subjects. And actually some of the courses that we teach, simulation, operations, research, optimization, calculus, these are classic subjects. And there is a lot of great material that one person can rely on and deliver a decent course. There is nothing wrong about this, but there is there is something wrong about this in the sense that this doesn't teach the student how to learn themselves if they needed to learn something on top of this knowledge, right? Or if they were to apply this knowledge to a new domain that they will work in the next couple of years, they don't know how to think, they don't know how to design, they don't know how to transfer. Therefore, now when we think about modern teaching, we think about more as the teacher being a guide rather than the dictator, the sage. And we think about this multi-way transfer. The teacher does not only teach, but they also learn. So what they can learn? They can learn about who is the current audience and what is interesting to them. And from that knowledge, they can determine what they should teach next so that the knowledge is attained better by this group and also the groups to come, right? This is very, very important. They have to go beyond discipline specific. There has to be discipline specific, but we also need to add some general skills that are related to lifelong learning, which means that we have to somehow distill what is the key learning point of our curriculum and then design our teaching methods accordingly. So this is why I personally understand about modern teaching. As you see, there is no technology on this list. In my opinion, it doesn't matter. You can use quizzes, Stack, you can use forums, you can make whole use of technology if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You can be 100% modern teacher with pen and pencil and the book. It's not about what you use. It's about your mindset. It's about what you deliver and how you deliver. Right? So in my opinion, this is what modern teaching is, having this two-way transfer with goals in mind, right? So I personally take like a grand plan approach to teaching, and I'm going to specifically think about like teaching a single module, okay? So when I think about the module, I think about first strategically, like what do I do before the term starts, during the term, and after the term, so that I can roll on for the next year in some sense, or maybe move to a different class. But I also go more like operational, so I go into the details of the lectures themselves. And for each lecture, I also have a similar breakdown. So what is important before the lecture, what we can do during the lecture, so that we can modernize our teaching, and then what can you do after, okay? So, and I'm, again, like, thought about these quite in depth myself, and I prepared a couple of slides that I would like you to think with me, right? So today, imagine that you will teach, say, simulation. That was one of the popular courses in the list that you guys gave to me. Imagine you're going to teach simulation in September. What can you do today? What would you do today? By today, I mean any day of your life. You're doing your activities, you're doing research, you're reading newspapers, you're interacting with your colleagues, you're going on your life. What can you do that can help with your teaching course X, module X in September? Any ideas? Laura says, think about the topics to cover throughout the whole course and learning outcomes. Think about fundamentals that I want to let students know. Get in touch with colleagues who taught before that unit. Okay, these are great examples. So I agree on that. So we really need to know the topic extremely well in order to be able to teach it well enough. In the sense that, you know, you have to be a subject expert so that you can identify the key learning points of a course. And sometimes we are not subject experts yet, but we are becoming, hopefully. And in that case, the best way is to actually, if it is possible, to attend the lectures of some other people, find some examples of, like, the internet is filled with videos of great people teaching similar topics. You can talk to professors, teaching assistants, and the students even, who has taken this course or similar courses. So it is important to gather some information. And you can read related topics, try to get inspiration, try to do this, like, you know, across disciplines connection that you can bring to your class that you will teach. And you can also gather material. So just, it's like, again, being like aware that one day I may teach topic XYZ. And if I'm reading a newspaper, in the background, it just stays. And if I see a news like article I like, I just note it. So also it's important to be organized in that sense as well, right? Then, yeah, so for example, we can think about a project, right, and mention that when the time comes. If you are designing the course in October and you try to do this at that moment, you will be overwhelmed. Nobody has the time. And, you know, inspiration may not come at that time. So if you are aware, this is 30 seconds today. You see something, you put aside, you work later on. So it really is also time saving. It will save your time for research as well. So just be active in that sense, I think. And we always tell to the early career researchers, please don't rewrite everything from scratch. I did it but at that moment I was not really, I was experienced enough. But it's very, very painful, and it will certainly take away from your research. And, you know, there is no need to actually redo the wheel, right? So find a material that you can rely on and use it in your first time. But please do not use somebody else's material as it is. Because if you do that, you won't feel comfortable in the classroom when you're teaching it. You will feel rushed and stressed. You won't know what is next. And that will reflect negatively on your own psychology and also on your teaching practice as well. So try to change it, even on your first time, a little bit. So somehow make it yours, right? And don't be afraid of taking material out. Many of the courses that you will get from other people will be taught for 10 years, and people will be adding material without thinking too much. So you can be brave. You don't need to teach every single thing. You can make a conscious decision at that moment. Okay. And the second one is you should be ready for multiple scenarios whenever possible, because this is the point that you can actually like take that multi-way transfer. So understand who is your audience and potentially go to two different directions. So you can, for example, have 2 case studies in mind, and you can use one of them depending on the group of students that you encounter. Or you can have a very detailed proof and a sketch of the proof. And you can start with the sketch of the proof and stop there and go in depth if your students tend to be too tired at that day or maybe don't have the technical background. So you just stop. Or you can have the second alternative, detailed proof, that you can go through with an audience that is technically savvy. So it is good to have 2 options ready to go and be able to move in between whenever it's possible. So this is like before the term in general preparation. But when you are actually in, say, September and you're about to teach in October, what you should do is actually, I think, straight sit down and spend a day or so to organize yourself very well, so that you don't panic during the term and you don't lose time from other things. So many people juggle through the term, trying to teach, trying to find the material in the last minute and this and that because of this lack of organization, and that affects their research. I am very ambitious in research, and I would like to early career researchers to be very ambitious as well. We should all do great research, because there is no point of being the best teachers unless you're on teaching track, to spend a lot of time on teaching at the expense of our research. But we want to be able to do research during the term when we are teaching. So to be able to do that, we should go to the term very well prepared. To be well prepared, you need to organize yourselves. So you need to set up the syllabus. You need to make sure the teaching team is formed and they're reliable. You need to more or less have your lecture materials ready. And you need to think a little bit about what's going to happen during the term. It's also very good ahead of time if you can ask the more senior colleagues what support you have. So for example, if you notice a student is having problems, they're late, they have a lot of health issues, who do you send them to? So have these names ready. And every year, quickly in September, ask the program leader, who is this person? What am I going to do? And delegate. Okay? Do not spend a lot of time on such issues where the universities are already giving support, but just be ready with the resources to help the students right away. And more importantly, have an Excel sheet or something, that whatever you decide to do, where you plan your course. And this is going to be an investment that you can use year after year. You just change the dates a little bit, but more or less you stay with it. So what I personally do is something like this. I organize my course into weeks. And for every lecture, every lab, I write detailed notes about which lecture is it, which book I'm covering, which exercises are relevant, and etc. And I put assignments that relate to these topics. So this also makes me understand if I'm covering everything in my assessments. When I'm writing my exam questions, I can quickly see which ones were assessed in the assignments, so which ones should be put in exam, for example. And when you come back to your lecture after you have given the class, we all relax for 10-15 minutes, because we're kind of tired. So that's a great moment to actually write some reflection. So I do that on my last column. So I just quickly write, this didn't go very well, I should do it next year, and this and that. So that this will also save a lot of time in next year to be able to see, when you're teaching hopefully the same course again, what you can quickly improve. Right? And then you have to decide on how the learning activities will go on during the week. Yeah. I'm going to show you two examples. One of them is classical, lecture in class. The other one is what we call flipped classroom. I'm sure you're all doing this already, but I think if you are mindful and sit down and think about your week and that week that you're planning ahead of the term, this would be very useful and you can shuffle things around. So, and one of the ideal circles in my mind for lecturing class goes this way. So we can give a pre-reading to students to put their mind into the learning state about the topic. This is supposed to be something very light, but it should be something also recalling existing knowledge. Right? So for example, you're going to teach linear optimization. This can be a very quick read about the 4 subspaces of linear algebra. I can guarantee you, every second-year student who comes to your classes will have forgotten their linear algebra, their calculus, and their, basic probability, unfortunately, even though it is just 3 months after their examinations. And it is a little bit our duty to remind them this, how important it is as well to give a signal. So we can set up some pre-readings. Then we go into the lecture, deliver the material. Then you can have, if you have the time, some quick online assignments, like simple forms, quizzes, and etc., just to see what is going on. if you have the time, you can have some tutorials that you have either planned yourself or you have identified online to suggest to students. So for example, if you're teaching simulation and if they're going to do, say, like any logic in their labs, this tutorial can be something related to any logic. So for all of us, there is something related to that. Then you can decide to send them to labs or problem classes, which should link to the lecture and the tutorial and the pre-reading that you have given. Potentially, this lab also can lead to the following week. So you can also close the circle in this way. Alternatively, you can apply flipped classroom. I don't know if, did anybody ever use the flipped classroom? Can you show me hands? Yeah, okay, Laura was brave enough. And and Zehra as well. Excellent. So I guess we were all forced in some sense during COVID, at least some of us, about this as well. So my understanding after like having some discussions with especially US-based professors, flipped classroom really wants to take out all the, the traditional deliverable classic material out of the classroom. Because in this philosophy, the interaction between the student and the teacher is very precious, very sacred, and it should not be used to reproduce something that is already available. So that means that you need to give them either a pre-recorded video or a reading or something else that will deliver everything. But when they come into the classroom, you have to devise in-class activities that will check if they have learned the key elements of that, like the lectures that you have done outside. And you also need to reassure that they are able to apply that to some problem sets or some case studies or some data sets. Right? And in order to do that, you need to have some sort of assessment that is put into this. If you don't assess what's coming out, it's very easy for the students to not do anything until the exam time comes, and then you lose this. So that's one of the most important things about the flipped classroom, that to use the in-class activities very carefully and make sure that you have some assessments related to the outside class now. Okay. So when we are teaching during the term, I just wrote a couple of things here, and I'm pretty sure you're quite aware of this. It is important that we modify our lectures, our homeworks. It's very, very important to talk to the students. Many great teachers I know always end the class 15 minutes early, weekly, and just hang around. That gives the students time to approach you with the questions that are burning, and it's very easy to handle them in person instead of dealing with them by emails, instead of letting the students get stressed. So I suggest, just talk to them. Okay. And as I said before, it's just good to be organized about following the students who don't show up, who are constantly late for some coursework, who may have some medical conditions. You may also observe some issues, like maybe the material is technically too challenging. And if that's the case, you may decide to encourage some study groups. So you can try to help them to help each other in some sense. Yeah. You should certainly be available for your students, but it's also very important that you protect your borders, your boundaries. So make a commitment to your teaching ahead of the term, but do not give more than you can afford. And again, that's also to protect your research. Yeah. In my opinion, teaching is a team job, and it's in many other places other than UK, every module is assigned a teaching assistant that is attached to this course. And I really like making them part of the design and delivery of the course. We are trying that in Southampton now. For my math programming class, my teaching assistant comes to classes, and we sometimes look at the exercises. I know it's not possible everywhere because of budget, restrictions and this and that. But if you have an opportunity, for example, if you have a PhD student who is wanting to go to academia, support them, make them a part of your teaching team, and also talk to them about how you are designing the course, why you chose this exam question, why you chose this lab activity, so that you don't only teach your students, you also teach your teaching assistants. This is something very important, and my observation since I came to the UK is this is not done enough in this country. But maybe you have a different point of view, I don't know. Different places operate. And of course, feedback is very important, and it's very important to be like creating positive experiences. Okay? So after the term, I do like looking back. Again, this is only a few hours, but it is well invested time for the next year. I actually also sometimes write exam questions for the next year. Because, you know, like people ask me to write exam questions in November when I'm extremely busy and I find myself quite stressed. But if I just taught the class, I just did the exam and I just like graded it, it's super easy to write another similar question. So if you have the energy, do it. It is really well paid off to have a nice question bank that you can use. And it's also very good to be organized. Have a nice LaTeX file, make things 1 year, spend your time to make things modular. So next year you can just choose different exercises, different exam questions, mix and match them. And if you feel inspired, you can also try thinking about a new and improved version, the next course to follow this module, if you have the opportunity. Okay. So I've spoken a lot. I'm going to try to do a group activity with all of us, if you guys agree, okay? I'm going to ask Caitlin to put us into groups of 3 or 4, I think. She's gonna decide, she's the master. And for each group, I would like you to choose one course. Based on the replies that I got on the questionnaire, I think these topics are possible. You can think about the simulation course, a stochastic modeling course, and then choose one of these like activities. I actually suggest weekly activities and have a discussion. Like, for example, if you were to offer a simulation class to third-year undergrads in your university, in say an OR degree, whatever you call it, what would be better? Would you think that a flipped classroom would work, or would you go with classic? And what type of weekly activities, in your opinion, work the best for this particular class? Okay, so we're going to give you 15. You can also talk about assessments and rubric and the term plan if you prefer to. But I think talking about weekly activities is a good use of time. So we're going to give you 15 minutes. And after you come back, I will ask every group to give us just a summary in 1 minute, okay? Unfortunately, that's how much we can afford. When I run this workshop, we usually have a very lengthy discussion in person. But today we're gonna give you 1 minute. Is everybody okay with that? Can I have a thumbs up? All right, excellent. Hopefully Caitlin is still with us and she will do her magic. All right, is it better now? Excellent. Okay, I hope that you had good conversations. We certainly had great fun in my room. So I'm going to ask one person from each group to share what the discussion was. So who was in Laura's room?
So we've nominated Osang to tell you about what we discussed.
Excellent. Go ahead, Hosang.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, our topic is optimization, and we have a very brief, overview of our term plans. So, if the optimization is not divided into 2 or 3 parts, so what we want to teach from it is linear programming and integer programming based. These 2 topics are good for starting and let people understand what is the optimization and how we can apply this on their method. So our teaching method is from examples, is starting from examples. So let some people understand what is some examples like TSP or some programming. So, and then we want to students become familiar with their examples and models. And our teaching method in each lecture is divided by into 2. So if we have 3 hours lecture, then 2 hours for teaching examples and 1 hour for practicing by themselves. Additionally, there is a computer programming section, for doing with computer programming. So every week, practice tools and small examples are given by weekly activities or some sort of small graded homeworks, to give people, to get more familiar with them.
Okay, sounds great. It's similar to how I teach optimization. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
thank you. And who was in Carol's room?
I think Sarah's going to.
Okay, go ahead.
So we were with Richlove and Felipe together, and we went for the data analytics course. Well, we did directly to weekly activities.
Thanks.
And we thought that having a mix of traditional and flipped classrooms might work well, where we thought about having the first couple of lectures in a traditional way so that the students know the basic concepts, understand what is expected from them during the rest of the term, and get them more comfortable, and then switch to a flipped classroom when it comes to everything related to data, because we want them to explore how to write code in any software that they can, to explore data visualization, descriptive statistics, anything related to that. And whenever they are in the classroom, in the flipped classroom model, we thought it would be good to have a teaching assistant, like you said, because it's difficult for the lecturer to just go there and try to debug every single computer when students have issues, and they will have issues. And then maybe for the last 2 weeks, maybe go back to a traditional lecture one to wrap up the whole term and make sure that everyone has at least achieved the learning outcome that were expected, and so on. So that was the program that we thought about.
Sounds exciting, but every one of us are asked to design courses in data science. So I have a feeling that you may have the opportunity to actually implement this. Thank you very much, Zehra. And Rita, would you like to share for us?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yeah.
So we didn't get into the term plan. Oh, sorry. So essentially we want to design a modules on simulation. We weren't able to go through every topic we want to cover, but we come up with the ideas that we would start by listing what is the topic we want to cover, and then decide on how to arrange them into the whole term. So splitting them across the week so that there is a clear pattern of learning, that the key concept is introduced first, and then the subsequent concept is supported by the first concept. We didn't decide on if we're going to go for entirely traditional methods of teaching or flip. What we talked about was that for each week, we look at the content that we want to cover and decide if it is appropriate or not to flip them. And we did look into one particular examples on conceptual modeling, and we decided that this might be the most appropriate one to flip, because based on one of the experience that we have, these are the ones where students gain the least by traditional method, and potentially can gain the most by having a flipped classroom, where they start with activities about how to either critique an existing models or try to design a new one. We also discussed how to make sure that they evaluate on the experience in flipped learning. So we might do some kind of quiz of the class to make sure that they are that the key information that we want them to know are covered. Yeah, I think that's roughly what we were covered. We didn't get to do assessment, unfortunately.
Sounds great. So I hope that you have learned something from each other, and this was a useful experience for you to think through. And ideally, you would teach classes with your co-teachers, and before you start teaching, before you start designing, you sit down and do planning together. So last year, we have designed data mining and analytics course with Christine Curry and taught it for the first time in University of Southampton to my master students in DDA program. And we have done even further than that. In addition to two of us brainstorming, we also had two master students who were graduating from our master's program that summer, and asked them to help us to come up with case studies, lab exercises, and some of the class activities together. So that was a really very fulfilling experience. But today I actually want to show you one example that I really like. And this is originally designed by Professor Barsimas in MIT, but in SUTD, my previous institution, we taught a version of this class, which we have redesigned ourselves as well. So this is a class that's called Analytics Edge, but it's a classical data analytics course. And it goes through say 12 weeks. And in each week, we had one challenge, one interesting example just to start that week's discussion. So for example, if you look at linear regression, the week starts with wine analytics. So we would come in for an hour, talk about the data, the problem, the story, why we want to analyze, why do we want to build a model. And after that, we have spoken about what is linear regression in full mathematical rigor. And then we would give the students a challenge to go to the lab and do this. And we have the course goes through topic by topic by this structure. Example, something to challenge them, to make them very excited, covering very different application areas, and then the methodology that corresponds to that in order to analyze them. So there is a very nice book on this. If you guys are thinking about ever teaching data analytics, you can take a look at this analytics stage. But this is just one example. I do like this one very much because it is very modern in its thinking. Yeah. So now I'm going to ask, would you like to take a couple minutes personal break and then we continue at 15? Before we look into more detail and strategically, what can we do? What type of activities may help when we are delivering these key concepts that we agree during the classes? Is that all right? Cool. Okay. I'll see you at 15. Thank you very much. So far, I'm having great fun. I hope you are too.
Yeah, we are.
Great. I think I will slowly get started. So in our remaining time, we're going to be looking at the lectures. And again, I will show you a few examples that I have done and I really enjoyed doing so. And a couple from my co-teachers as well from last 10 years. So don't get overwhelmed. This is not expected that you do for every lecture something like this, but just hopefully it will be more or less inspirational, okay? So again, we're going to talk a little bit about my philosophy, right? So in my mind, the first contact, if there are any Star Trek fans, they will understand what I mean here. First contact is very, very important. And I think it is worthwhile to spend 15-20 minutes in the beginning of the very first lecture to form that connection with our students and also show them that we really care about them. We had taken the time to prepare something 15 minutes extra for them to get them motivated. Students really appreciate this type of teachers. So what you can do is you can tell a little bit of your story, like where you are, how you ended up teaching this course. It is usually very nice. And it's also very important for undergrads and masters who are in that important point of their own journey, and they may have some burning questions and they may identify that you may have a very quick answer to them. And they may come and ask that in the 15 minutes. For example, they may be going for a PhD and they don't know who else to talk. And if you tell them, oh, I did a PhD in America, that may be the signal for them that they can ask that one critical question. Which university should I apply? So that's good to give a bit of a story, not necessarily over personal. The second one is it's always very good to put the course into a story itself. And actually, we are very lucky as operations research teachers in a very broad sense. Like OR has a great history and in the making and also in the past that we can find tons of examples. So you can relate to like, 4T and manufacturing, time studies, industrial evolution, obviously, can come all the way to artificial intelligence and importance of it, optimization today in, transport automated systems. You can form whatever you like, but it's good to put this, tell the students what you're doing today, and also this term is going to be worthwhile. And there are also some popular books if you wanted to use. There is a nice book on science at war, for example, that shows the history of war during Second World War, but there are a lot of other things. You can identify the challenges ahead of the term for the students. So for example, when I'm teaching mathematical programming, I directly tell to my third year students that this is a challenging course, especially because you have forgotten your linear algebra and calculus. So I'm going to do a lot of it, and I'm warning you, please take this as an opportunity in the next couple of weeks when you don't have too many coursework and etc. Do a quick, recap of this. And you can also suggest study programs at different levels. So you can tell to students, like, if you have struggled, for example, again in linear algebra, I suggest that you do this and that. And if you were like a student, everything is fresh on your mind, then you can tell them, do this. Unfortunately, current students do not read any books. They don't see too many models in OR. They're very different than us, especially like my generation. So it is also very important for us to identify the importance of textbooks in the first class. So I think it would help you if you were to actually bring like this kind of classical textbooks of OR and tell the students, once in a while, just flip through this. It will help you for your general degree. And you can also explain to them why you have designed the course the way it is. So I always tell to students, we're going to do 2-hour lecture, you're going to do 2 hours of like labs. We decided that in the labs, you're going to try this and that. And I also tell them, we chose this case study, we chose this data set because we thought that is interesting for such and such reason. So it makes them really feel part of the decision-making process, and it makes them actually trust you. And of course, you should tell them like that you're always open for feedback, and they should feel comfortable to tell you if something doesn't go well. So I do this to an extent for some of the courses that I actually give them like something schematic. So when I'm teaching optimization, I like use something like this. So I tell them optimization relies on certain things like topology, algebra, and calculus. And it's going to be very important for those of them who study, say, machine learning later on. Thank you very much, Christine. So, and like you can do this for many courses, and it really makes them very acutely aware that what they're learning is important, and later on they can come back to this course. So that is one thing I do. And specifically for certain courses, I also give them a roadmap. And this is very similar to what optimization, the course that you had in mind before. So I tell them like specifically what I think about an optimization problem to be. And then I show them various categories of optimization problems. But more importantly, I link each category and the pathway we're taking to the course material. It's very important, for example, for students to understand linear optimization lies between continuous and combinatorial optimization. It is a special case of convex optimization, but it's a general case of network optimization, right? So a lot of operations research is about actually classifying the type of problem we're supposed to solve, and then finding the existing software or solution method to apply to this problem that we want to solve, right? Therefore, for the students, like being able to identify a word problem as a mathematical problem and be able to classify that mathematical problem within the general set of the types of problems is very, very key. And optimization is like one course that this comes very naturally, but I believe stochastic modeling, data science, like many of the courses, we can think like this. Like, we can think about a pathway that we are taking during the course. And then after the course is like over, or sometimes in midway, actually, I look back as well. So for example, if we are done with linear optimization, which we have covered up after convex optimization as a special case, I stop and look back and say, oh, by the way, remember, we said in the beginning, optimization models can be categorized such and such, and that we follow this journey, and this is where we are. And sometimes I tell them what other branches exist and we didn't cover. So here you can talk about like quadratic programming, conic programming, STPs, nonlinear programming, bi-level programming, how general they are. You're not going to ask questions about them, but here the point is also a little bit increasing their general culture and consciousness about the topic, right? But also to give the ones that are ambitious an opportunity to like, potentially extend their knowledge, to find more to read. So I also, in the very first class, tell the students sometimes the achievements of last year's classes, just to tell them where they will be, hopefully, at the end of the class. So this example is from my advanced topics in optimization class, which is basically a very topical class on scheduling, which includes a lot of integer programming formulations. And I used to give a very fun project that runs through the labs, which is 6-week consecutive labs, in which the students would solve different versions of vehicle routing problem. And then we used to ask them to make posters of this. And every year I would bring the best poster from the previous year and just to show the students what is the final grade goal. So all the 3 girls in this example are PhD students in their final year in the US at this moment. I really like this project. It's very special. So we sometimes take these students to plant visits, some like company visits, and we sometimes bring like external speakers to the courses. And if something like this had happened last year, you can include it in the first lecture just to excite them a little bit. So you're thinking about like a pitch in the like first class, right? Then before your actual lecture, and this will apply to every lecture that you will give, I do a few things, and I think these are very useful. I look at my lecture notes, what I want to teach, and etc. And then I try to add some simple diagrams, simple slides that will help the lecture the following day, for example. So I always share my lecture notes ahead, but I never share the full lecture notes. Every one of you will decide what works well for you. And I think it should be a conscious decision. You can try a few things. But over the time, what I found with this, at least modern set of students, is that, you know, they don't read books too much. And if I give everything ahead, sometimes they don't really take too many notes. And I think note taking and doing some stuff on during lecture is very important. So when I teach, I actually have some problems that I flash on the slide, and I ask the students to do it on their own the next 5 minutes. And those answers to those questions are never in my slides, of course, that I give ahead. So I prepare 2 sets of slides. And this is actually very easy if you learn LaTeX properly, and then you put the if in the first like line of LaTeX, you just press a button. So I don't want people to lose time having 2 slides and having a lot of admin related to that. Again, if you're organized, can be very easy. So I produce 2 versions, with and without solutions, and give one without solutions ahead and one immediately after the class with the solutions. And I always take 5 minutes to look very quickly to what I'm going to cover. Like if I don't take that like 10 minutes of reflecting and thinking a little bit about what I'm going to teach after what and what's the purpose, I find myself lost. And it's very easy to find yourself in that situation today because we're all very busy. You know, we have meeting, and then run to lectures sometimes in the very last minute, right? But that 10 minutes of like thinking, taking a moment and like imagining the class is actually very, very important, and it will make you better teachers, I think. And I also try to put on some alternative explanations, some challenges, and etc. like on the side, sometimes as extra slides or extra lecture notes. You won't have this immediately. Do not try to prepare it or that. But over time, have these, you know, like just keep adding them so that you have the material ready later on. And also we forget a lot. I mean, eating well, drinking enough water, sleeping, and being like energetic, fit, I mean, taking good care of our mental and physical health is actually very important as teachers for us, because teaching 2 hours standing or doing all these activities can be very daunting. So you need to enjoy yourself. You need to really see it as like a fun activity that you're doing. You come out with like adrenaline. But in order to do that, we have to be prepared. Right? So just word of advice, maybe I haven't done it too much at your age, but take care of your physical and mental well-being before teaching. And after teaching, sit down and reflect. You know, don't run if it's possible from here to there. And okay, so what can we do during the lectures? So there is a certain mentality that you can try to go into if it fits to you. Like you can try to be, as I said, organized, prepared. You can, hopefully you will be enthusiastic. So I think it's very, very also important to be slow and clear. I mean, not slow in the sense that, you know, everybody is bored, you're like, but, you know, just not rushed when you are communicating the lecture material. It's also very important to be relaxed and very important to be honest. So I'm very bad with algebra. I'm, you know, 3 + 7 it doesn't come to my mind anymore. I used to be very good when I was 8, but somehow it is lost. And I actually don't care. I do simplex on the board every single time, and every single time I mess it. And I ask the students to help me shout and, you know, like be there. And it is very good for them, because everybody gets confused with simplex. Everybody's like, gets, oh, this row to there, that and that, and we're not supposed to do like, you know, this mental arithmetic. It helps them a lot to see that the exam, that, you know, we also may be doing mistakes. But more importantly, like if you're honest, if there will be some questions you can't answer, it's also okay to say that, okay, I'm going to come back to that. Or it's also okay to say, let's think together. If you don't panic, take a deep breath, you know, step aside and look at what you found challenging when you're teaching. It will come to you if you know the material well enough, right? But if you go panic and try to mess it up and then try to correct it because you thought you make a mistake, then it doesn't end well. So it is very, very important at that moment to say, oh, oops, maybe I didn't think it through. Let me just take a step. You take a step, right? So that's good, I think. So I personally very much like spending 5 minutes reminding the students where we were. Sometimes have my summary slide from the previous lecture already so that we can just walk through. I always tell them what we are learning that day and what is the key thing that I really, really want them to take as a takeaway message. Right? And you should not use crowded slides. You shouldn't try to cover too much material. And when you are teaching, you should reason if possible with them. So I try to teach like step by step and filling in the gaps. And I know it's a little bit mundane, but especially with undergrads, I actually say very trivial facts. Sometimes like 1 + 1 is 2. So like, but this is very important for simulation, for optimization, for other like project management, whatever we are, because we are relying on other subjects quite heavily, but this is not very obvious to the students. So sometimes, unfortunately, we'll even have students who won't know how to plot a graph, and we take a lot of things quite granted. Especially if you're teaching, say, master students from different backgrounds who've done other things at the end, you may be assuming too much. So it is good to actually, you know, recall the basics when you're teaching so that they realize, oh, I don't know this basic. And then that will be an opportunity for them to fill in the blanks if they're good enough, if they really want to learn. Right? And that actually brings us back to think you're not supposed to teach. We're supposed to be coaching them to learn the material. So if we can think through the material in front of them as teachers, then they can approach a new material, a new textbook, and learn the material from there, imitating our style. Right? It's not necessarily about the technical knowledge we are giving. It is more about how can I approach a technical knowledge? How can I understand it deeply? How can I connect it to elsewhere? And how I can learn it very well myself, right? So that's what the students should be doing. So when it comes to covering a lecture, I really like breaking it into key concepts, and I try to cover one key concept per lecture. And if you think about it, many of the courses we are teaching, there are not too many key concepts. Like we do repetitions, we do applications, we do derivations, but we don't teach too many key concepts. And if you're aware of what are the key concepts of the module you're teaching yourself, it will be easy for you to design a course around that. And I try to make them understand this key concept by this circular loop. So I start with a conceptual activity to put the mind in the correct learning state. And I provide some technical knowledge, quite rigorously mathematically, stop and ask the students to do some toy examples on their own. During this time, I talk and interact a lot with them. And then after that, I solve the problem step by step, thinking thoroughly, and then do a very rigorous setup of everything all together. And if possible, I finish it with an application, something hands-on that they can do. Okay. I know this doesn't mean too much to you now, so I'm going to show you an example. Okay. Dynamic programming is one of my favorite topics. Actually, I love a lot of things about optimization quite deeply, but this is one of my favorite topics to teach because it's a very hard topic to teach. In order for a person to be an expert in dynamic programming, they need to understand a lot of things very well. What do you think is the key concept that they really, really mastered so that everything else can build on? Are there any brave souls that would like to shout? What is the key that everything relies on if we are teaching dynamic programming? Anything is good, just say something. Or write something. Backward induction, okay, recursion, kind of the same thing, but I like recursion more. And actually, I think it is also the state. What is the state, what we are recursing on, right? What changes, what is the key information that we need to store when we are building our functions, when we are describing the problem? But I mean, I may be wrong. I mean, everybody may have a different opinion, and because sometimes we all hang our knowledge and learning from one point, and everything comes together in our mind, but that point doesn't need to be the same for everyone. But for me, it is recursion and state, right? So I devised a week teaching dynamic programming, and that week has these 3 activities. So the first activity is a peer game. So I come into the classroom and I ask the students to play a game with matches. Sometimes we have matches, sometimes we don't have matches. I just tell them, imagine the matches, nobody cares, right? And then the rule of the game is that they need to take turns, and every time they can take 1, 2, or 6 matches from the pile that they start with, and they start with 20. And then the last person to pick up the matches wins. Yeah. And then we ask them, can you find a strategy that will always win this game? So we just let them think in pairs for 5 minutes or so. And hopefully when they're thinking, they identify that, oh, there is something interesting here. There is a structure. If I have 3 matches left, then I know what else to do. If there are chess players there, if they're used to inductive thinking, you're not maybe adding too many things, but there will be a lot of people who never actually thought about it. They're not into playing games and etc. Zehra says she had a similar example. So there is also a second thing that is very good about this game. There is no stage in here. Many people get very confused with dynamic programming that stages are very, very important, but actually they're not one of the key elements. So it also tells the students that what is the important information, which is the state space. So I think it's a great game to prepare their minds. And from there, I define what are the key elements like state, stage, value, function, what they are. And then I do 3 or 4 examples, actually I asked them to do, on shortest path, traveling salesman, and other things that each can be written as dynamic programs. And now, and then I solve some of them very carefully on the board myself, identifying again the important rigorous parts. Then I formalize, and then we go and play a game, like run a class competition in the lab, where they need to code an algorithm that is related to this coin changing problem, and then the best team gets 5 points, or best team gets a cookie, whatever it is. So a lot of students, especially in our programs, cannot write recursive programs very well. I taught this class to mixed audience of computer science students and industrial engineering students, and the computer scientists just, killed the OR students by far. There was not even like a 1 student in top 10. No, it was embarrassing, but it's a very good call for our students. But the funny part is the computer science students, on the other hand, cannot do modeling, because you give them a problem and they start coding, which is very wrong, right? So both class groups of students have advantages and disadvantages, and we do a similar activity that makes the OR students advantages, and 2 groups also get their respective messages. So that's one example. What else can you do? So you can do this, what they call think, pair, share approach. Has anybody heard this before, this term? Can I see some hands? Okay, Luke is knowledgeable. Okay, so there's this very famous physicist, Eric Mazur. I believe he's in Harvard now, and he's been talking about this pair learning or peer learning for a very long time. He advocated that a lot, and he suggests doing an activity of this sort, where you bring a question, a fundamental question that will start a debate between your students. You ask it, and you ask them to pair up and argue and make a decision. And then you poll the answer. So you see how many, yeses or no's in some sense to this question that you're asking. And then you let the class to have an open discussion in a larger group if it's possible, and then you repoll. And for various examples in physics and other sciences, he showed that the class converges to the correct answer because they convince each other as a group. And it is believed that this is a good method of making the information absorbed by a crowd. We can do this for OR as well. There are a lot of examples that we can apply it, but we don't have a bank of examples like Eric Mazur did for physicists. But you can devise a few if you wanted to. The other thing that I really like using, if it's possible, props and visualization. We used to print functions, 3D functions for our calculus class using 3D printers in Singapore, but we had money and resources, so I'm not suggesting you should do that. But there are basic things you can do. So this is one example that I learned from David Schmois when I was taking PhD level scheduling class at Cornell. So David Schmois has proved a lot of theorems related to scheduling approximation algorithms himself. And he used to tell us that I always think about jobs to be scheduled like on a tape in my mind, and I'm trying to prove or understand things. I move, cut schedules, load these, colorful jobs on different machines. And I heard from other people, they think scheduling as like with Legos in their minds. Again, they visualize. This is something very useful. If I can afford it, if I have the time, when I'm teaching this particular algorithm for preemptive machine learning with whatever like objective function, I actually bring a strip of paper with colors on it, in which each color corresponds to a job and its length is proportional to the time that we need to spend on this job. And I give Caesars to students and ask them to load this job into 5 or 3, whatever number of machines we have. And when they're doing this, they observe something very key. If you cut a certain length, then and put these strips of paper on parallel machines, then the colors will not overlap. And that is one key point of this algorithm that we are teaching, is that, in scheduling, if you're preempting machines, preempting a job to load on different machines, you cannot overlap on the machines for the same job. And that's exactly the same thing. So you probably do not follow what I'm saying if you've never taken a scheduling class. But the idea is that there is this algorithm and there is this proof for which there is the one-to-one physical correspondence that you can do with the students. And, you know, doing it once in their life will make them start thinking visually. If you have an opportunity like this, you can bring something like this. And in calculus, we used to ask students to bend wires and, like, you know, kind of visualize problem, visualize differentiability, visualize, you know, what does it mean to go to plus infinity. So there are a lot of things you can use. And of course, you can use software. As I said, like, I'm teaching as if you have no access to modern software, but obviously there are tons of things on the web that you can use for them to visualize functions and different things. And these are good things if you use properly. The whole point, though, which I will say in the next one as well, you're not just supposed to do these things because they're fancy or they look cool and this and that. You're supposed to identify one or two things that are key, that is worth your time, worth their time, worth the effort. And that's supposed to help with the rest of the stuff. Again, you can use games and operations research, simulation, operation management. We are really lucky. There are so many companies who want to make money, I guess, as well from these games for the classrooms. We have a variety of them that are available for us. If you have the opportunity, you should use them. Students really, really like these. But just bringing a game is not good practice. You're supposed to use the game in parallel to some key takeaway message of what you're teaching. They really need to go in parallel. So you need to talk about some, like, you know, effects in operations management or simulation related to some queuing. And you're supposed to use the game, design the game in a way that they can experience that. So my advice is, if you don't have the time to do this properly, there is really not too much point. But you can also call for some companies. There are a lot of companies in the UK who want to engage with students. They actually have games that they can bring. So you can have your industry contacts. You can ask them if they have something that they want to come in and run with your students. Some companies have pricing games. Some companies have simulation games. So it's good to have a contact of this sort if you are able to for your class. And we use to have a lot of, like, small competitions and challenges. We cannot give points for these assessments. In the UK, it's impossible to modify the class to have 5 points, you know, grade for a challenge. But you can bring a small chocolate, or, like, you know, you can just give it like a golden star, I don't know, some, like, you know, well done sticker, and the students will be fine. They really like competition. So, for example, we have asked multiple times the students to try to code Sudoku in 1 hour lab as a part of integer programming course. And they don't know what they're coming to. They come into the class and say, today we're going to give you a challenge. Here's your challenge. Code a solver for Sudoku. This is your example today. Whoever solves first gets the whatever. Right? So you can do something like this if you feel inspired. And the other thing, we use several times stories for our classes. So, for example, when we're teaching calculus, we had asked the students to write a story that will go well with the class. And a few of our students and one of our lecturers came up with this example, which is called Little Miss Nobla's Climbing Adventure. And the idea is that there is this girl who has a broken compass. It only always points to the direction of steepest descent, and she's trying to get to the, like, top of the mountain. There's a very cute story about the rabbit needs to eat and this and that, but it doesn't matter. So we asked the students to, like, just one afternoon to just sit down from some groups and do this. But when they were trying to find the stories, they had to go back to the calculus class, and they themselves identified storylines. And this is an amazing adventure for them, because they were able to find out what is steepest descent, what is the key thing, what would be, like, you know, thing to build on, right? And they thought about what's the goal, which was a mountain. So I can come in and say to the students, but it's different when they discover that the highest point of a function and the mountain is the same thing. So again, if you're inspired, if you have the resources, I believe there are a lot of funding opportunities in the UK that is untapped by our community or our people. But many people in physics, astronomy, geography, they are actually getting funds in order to develop, teaching material of this sort, which can also be used for outreach for, say, high school recruitment. So if you feel inspired, you will have, I believe, some way of also funding this. And this is just another example. This is for our linear algebra class, and we were trying to teach the students the importance of independent directions when you're trying to express vectors in vector space. And then we have come up with this cartoon series where coffee and tea are independent directions, and you mix them in order to get beverages and etc. It's a funny story, but the interesting part with about this one is it's a very local story. So it took advantage of the fact that we were in Singapore, and Singaporeans have this mixture of coffee and tea, which is a weird drink which doesn't exist anywhere else. So you can do something like that related to where you are as well. And the key message here is that it's quite well known, human brain really learns very well and reacts very well to storylines. And the fact that we are teaching applied mathematics does not mean that we don't have stories, we can't use these ones. So there is a possibility if we want to be adventurous. Yeah? And these are just a few things, as I said, and they're all investments, they're all teamwork. And I was very lucky to have like-minded people to do these things. But there are people like that around you, and we can form our own community as well if you guys are interested. So just to recap, you can do all of these, a few of these, whatever you can during your class. And after the class, I personally really like, as I said before, leaving a little bit of time for interactions. You should always share your lecture notes immediately so that you don't have too much stress. And it's very good practice to give extra questions to the students and also extra references of different challenges if you can. And I always also try to write a reflection note if I have the time. Yeah. And this is one thing I think nobody really tells too much about, but the last class is also very important. When the term is about to end, the students are very stressed because of their exams, but some of them are also very stressed because they are potentially ending their degrees. And I think it is good if we can be there and at least tell them what is happening with the exams, to reassure them, to calm them, to answer any questions, make sure that they're not hanging out when they're entering that preparation period. But you can also talk a little bit about what they can do next. So you can at this moment have a very ambitious lecture on your research. You can call a researcher, you can call an industry partner, you can showcase something. It's good not to test the students on the material you're teaching on the last week anyway. So you can use this one last lecture as something that they can always remember and cherish. And you can also offer to become a mentor to a few of them. Every class has 1 or 2 students who need the mentorship, who want to do PhD, who want to apply to a certain job, and they sometimes don't have correct person with the OR knowledge in the background. So if you are interested, you can also close up with this, by the way, if you need to apply for a PhD, I'm here, I'm happy to talk to you if you can afford it. So it's good to stop like that. And I always ask them to do a reflection at the end. And this is what I ask. I asked everybody to take out a piece of white paper and write 3 things that they really liked about the class and 3 things that they were disappointed about. And it's good if you can afford to read them together a little bit or have a little bit of a discussion. And it's very good if you can list their acquired skills, because then you are giving them a vocabulary that they can advertise themselves for future employers. So you can tell them, oh, by the way, now you can do you can solve large scale in your programs, you can do modeling, you can put together a simulation for a hospital's emergency care. You couldn't do it, but now with this class, you can do this. So it's good to give them that type of confidence if you have the time. Yeah. All right, so normally here I ask the students to write down something and give to me, but you guys are away. So I will ask you to email me something if you want to. right? Just similar to this, reflecting back to these 2 hours. I'd appreciate if you can just send 3 sentences about what you liked about the 2 hours that we spent together today, and also give some feedback. We're doing it for the first time in the UK. I have done this workshop in person in the US and Singapore with very different people from different backgrounds. So I would really appreciate your feedback. So maybe we can make it useful for the UK crowd if you thought it was useful, and we can certainly add on. And I want to give you a coursework. I don't know if it's acceptable, but you know, I have no power on following this up, so it's more like an offer. So would you like to do one activity, like identify a key concept for the course that you will teach next, and develop a joke, a story, a game, a concept question, a competition, an illustration? It can be 1 slide. And I'm going to show you what is my example for clustering, which hopefully you will love. This is mine. So last year I was thinking about exactly the same thing. I'm going to teach data mining and analytics with Christine. First time, you know, it's supposed to be modern. I'm supposed to be like preaching all these things. What can I do? And I had this master's student that we were designing the course together. And I asked to him, what is interesting to you? And this student from China said, Pikachu. It's like, what do you mean? You know, we discussed, we had a long list of what can be interesting to our incoming master's students. Well, our master's students are not terribly diverse. So last year we had maybe 60% from China and some people from India and a very few people from the UK. And I think this is similar for everybody else. And we have actually more women than men, which is very great. And everybody was coming from different places, different industry experience. And we were trying to find what would be common. And this student actually convinced me that this generation is very knowledgeable about Pikachu, and this is interesting for them because they've done all these activities and etc. I said, okay, challenge accepted. Let's do the like concept activity with Pikachu. So we asked the students to cluster these 6 not Pikachu's, Pokemons. I don't even know why they are. You can see my level of engagement with this. But we asked 6 different Pokemons to be clustered in small group discussions. And of course, everybody came up with different types of clusters and etc. And my son, who is a year 3 student, does this activity with geometric shapes, where they also cluster, the shapes with 3 sides, shapes with 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, etc. So certainly it's just like 8-year-old activity. Nobody is saying it is something deep. But on the other hand, it takes a moment to actually think about what clustering. And this is exactly what they need. So this makes them understand that it's not obvious how many clusters there are. It's obvious what you're going to be using as your base of clustering. And you can immediately see sometimes 1 dimension is enough. And then you can discuss, oh, what if I use 2 properties, then I have more and less, right? And then you can, from here, take this Pokemon example and push it through. And I've done this, right? We have, like, using this, we've done 2 labs where they have, worked with a data set with Pokemons, with their attack skills and this and that. And then you can point out everything you want to talk about conceptually about clustering, its complexity, properties, challenges, opportunities. It's good fun to do something like that. So yeah, that's my challenge to you. And this didn't really take us more than 10 minutes to come up with an idea. Labs took, of course, hours to put together. But yeah, so if you accept my challenge as your coursework, so by the end of the month, send me 1 slide. And if you agree, we can share it among us. So it would be, I think, very nice way to reflect back all together. Okay, so I think that's how much time I have, and I really use it at the very end. But I can take 1 or 2 questions if, like, we have 3 minutes, if anybody wants to ask something. Any comments? Look like a person I can pick on and won't be very angry. What did you think was good about this, Luke?
I think it was good because I've been doing a teaching qualification, and most other people are not in a technical subject, and so when they talk about flipped, I'm always just a bit skeptical in terms of how it translates. But going through this has given me a bit, or at least given me an example of where you can use the modern sort of teaching approaches in our subject. So that's helpful.
Thank you very much. That's exactly where this workshop actually started. I sat through a lot of professional development programs with our PhD students because I was like supervising the program. And I thought they were, I don't know, like too far from what we do. I mean, I think the people who design this stuff has like English or philosophy in their mind, because the tips and examples they give do not make any sense to me. There are great examples for physics because of Eric Mazur and others, but not for war. So that's why I wrote down these slides basically on my own. And that's great to hear. So what did not work? Was there anything else that we could have done? Was there any other expectations? Or anybody else? Yeah, there.
I was a little bit skeptical at the beginning because it will be a 2-hour workshop. Might be a little bit, I felt it would be a little bit too long maybe to digest whatever could come up, but it flew by. So it was good to have those 2 hours. I think with this content, having less would be rushed, like and similar to what we try to do in a lecture, I think. I mean, putting too much for too little time.
That's good. So was the 2 hours okay? I normally teach this actually in 2 different days, 2 afternoons. We do the first half and, let the students just, take away and do whatever they can. And then we come next week and reflect and then do the second half. But
I think I would go for 2 separate days, having the same team of people to have more connection even for networking and reflect on what, like maybe one after the assignment that you give us, just to reflect on what people have prepared and see, just have a feeling of to exchange different good practices or bad practices in that sense.
Well, that's back to Laura. I mean, they can decide on maybe like doing some sequences of things and bring them back, like a cohort of early teachers together. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really a useful comment actually. Like there's so many things we could go away and work on for a little bit to come back. I think it would be nice to do this in person sometime, maybe in a whole day long activity.
Mm-hmm.
So we did actually
fun.
we actually discussed that, and I think that would be great.
Okay.
Like maybe the next time it runs, we try to do that in person and have a longer period of time to go away and work on things and come back and present them would be excellent. So I think that's the way that Celine would like to or does run this course, but we really give her a challenge of can you squeeze this into 2 hours, and I think it was really, really great. So thank you so much.
All right.
I think we definitely want to do the full version now.
Well, content-wise, this is almost everything, but just we can do more activities if you wanted to.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I really enjoyed seeing you all. I know most of you from conferences, but there are a few faces that I met today, which is great. So hopefully we'll meet in person again. And take good care. And I'm kind of offering free mentorship if you want to, like any help, if you want to do any of these, feel free just to write. We can have a chat. We can take a look. I'm helping some of my previous students from these workshops. It's good fun. We can learn from each other. I always learn new things. That's good. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much for your 2 hours. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Don't forget your homeworks.